12 years of service, and yet somehow I was still the girl no one remembered in the group photo. The uniform fit better than it did 12 years ago. Crisper. Heavier. Like it carried everything I had done, and everything no one else had seen. My boots clicked across the polished floor of Fort Sutter's south wing, the air laced with the familiar blend of starch gun oil and expectation. It was inspection day. Every officer walked like they were being watched because we were. I adjusted my cap before walking past the administrative board, glancing at the logistics memo pinned to the glass. The lineup for the upcoming presidential commendation ceremony was printed in block letters, names arranged with robotic precision. Marshal Ryan, Captain Lead Recon Bravo Langston Sarah, Major Intel Jameson Dwight, Lieutenant Cole Engineering Division. I read it once. Then again. My name wasn't there. Not under logistics. Not under guest seating. Not under commendations. I wasn't anywhere. My fingers twitched at my side. I stepped closer to make sure it wasn't an oversight. No, it was precise. It was intentional. Backtracking toward the west corridor, I made my way to the operations level. My father's door, General Warren, was cracked open just enough to let words spill out. I paused. Marshall exemplifies the selfless tradition of leadership. 12 years, 3 deployments, 0 complaints, he said, rehearsing into a small digital recorder. The embodiment of service. I leaned just slightly forward enough to glimpse inside. His desk, always surgically clean, now had a single photo frame on it. An old photo, our company reunion in Kandahar. Ryan stood dead center, beaming in a starched uniform. I was off to the side, cropped just at the elbow. I remembered that day. I remembered pulling double-duty coordinating evac drills. I remembered missing the group shot by 20 seconds. Apparently, it hadn't mattered. I wasn't supposed to be in it anyway. Lunch in the officers' mess hall didn't feel like a reprieve. The weather was just mild enough to allow for outdoor seating, and the tables were packed with junior officers and senior brass exchanging strategic pleasantries. As I joined a bench near the perimeter, an unfamiliar major glanced up from her tray and asked, "You're the new admin assistant, right?" For comms, I didn't respond. She didn't wait for an answer. I was about to stand when Lieutenant Boone approached, his tray balanced loosely in one hand. His expression was unreadable, as always. "You're sitting in the shadow zone," he said, sliding into the bench across from me. I raised an eyebrow. "Is that a metaphysical observation or just poor lighting?" He shrugged. "Both." For a few minutes we ate in silence. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small sealed folder marked "Restricted." He placed it gently between us as if it might start ticking. "Training schedule," he said. "Something you didn't get because the system sometimes forgets the best people." I blinked. That wasn't casual. He said it like he meant it, like it wasn't the first time he'd seen this kind of erasure happen. Boone didn't elaborate. He just sipped his iced tea and nodded toward the trees. "Spring's early this year. Makes everything look brighter than it really is." Back in my office, small, windowless but mine, I pulled the drawer open looking for a pen. Instead, I found the notice, a memo marked "For Internal Command Review." It listed projected commendation recipients. I wasn't just missing from logistics. I wasn't just overlooked. My name had been present and then redacted. The ink wasn't even smudged. Someone had gone in and deliberately removed it. I stood frozen for several seconds. Not shocked. Not quite. But there was that slow surge behind my ribs, the deep ache that came when something you suspected suddenly became real. When the silence around you hardened into confirmation. My fingers brushed against the corner of something else tucked deeper in the drawer. A cream envelope, edges curled, sealed in a wax I hadn't seen in over a decade. My mother's handwriting still sharp, still slanted. She opens her drawer, finds her mother's sealed letter, and whispers, "Maybe this time I'll read it." A single name typed on an invitation can speak louder than 1,000 drills under fire. The Joint Command Lounge smelled like lemon polish and cloying approval. Someone had set out wine, but no one was really drinking. That was the thing about these unofficial celebrations, you were expected to look happy, not be happy. Ryan stood near the fireplace, posture perfect in a pressed dress uniform that hadn't seen actual mud in at least 2 years. The plaque on the wall behind him read, "Honor in all things," etched into oak with gold trim. I'd walked past that phrase for over a decade. Tonight it stared back at me like a punchline. Everyone's gaze orbited Ryan. I caught snatches of words as they floated through the air, natural leader textbook decision-making unshakable under pressure. They were talking about the joint recon in Helmand 2018. My mission. My command. The one that ended with evac under gunfire and 3 wounded, including me. I leaned against the buffet table, resisting the urge to break a wine glass just to hear something real. Ryan caught sight of me and walked over with that trademark lopsided grin. "Hey, Lena, wild seeing you out of a field tent." I forced a smile. Some of us live in more than one dimension. He laughed like I was teasing. Ryan never saw the cuts under the surface, only the packaging. Maybe he couldn't. Or maybe he'd trained himself not to. "I hope you're sitting close to the head table," he said, genuinely pleased. "I'm not even sure I'm on the chart." He blinked. "What?" "Never mind." He patted my shoulder like I was some kid who'd done a decent job showing up to rehearsal. "Tonight's really for the family," he said. "I think Dad's proud." Before I could answer, a tap of glass brought the room to silence. General Frank Warren raised a flute with military elegance. To Captain Marshall, he declared, "The future face of this command. Not only is he exemplary on the field, but he's the model of modern leadership, adaptive, honorable, humble." People clapped. Some cheered. Boone, leaning against the far wall, didn't move. I watched my father toast another man for my work. It wasn't the first time. It might not be the last. The room began shifting toward dinner, people migrating to the officers' club 2 floors down. Cynthia intercepted me by the elevator, a silk scarf around her neck, gold brooch matching the chandelier light. "Elena," she said, smiling tightly, "would you help coordinate the seating? The colonel's wife gets nauseous near shellfish, so we'll need her table adjusted." I stared at her. "I'm a guest." Her brow furrowed, not from confusion, just mild annoyance. "Oh, of course. I assumed. Well, no matter." She turned with the grace of someone who had always seen me as a line item. I didn't follow her. Instead, I walked slowly, purposefully toward Boone, who was still watching like a man reading a script he'd seen before. "Dinner?" I asked. He shook his head. "Too many forks, too many masks." He slipped something into my hand without looking, folded official paper, the kind that bled truth if you knew how to read between the black lines. I waited until I reached the coat room to open it. It was a mission summary. Operation Black Watch, Helmand Province. April 2018. I knew every line of that deployment. I had drafted the initial proposal, coordinated the staging routes, and led both entry teams on rotation. The debrief had listed me as commander of record. Except this version didn't. It was clean, immaculately edited. My name had been replaced with Ryan's. The language had been softened. The errors airbrushed, the commendations shifted entirely. My chest constricted. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger would have been cleaner. I stared at the signature block. It was redacted, of course, but the style, the phrasing, everything about it reeked of deliberate design. Boone joined me just as I was folding the paper back into thirds. "Who signed off on this edit?" "Same man who raised you," he answered quietly. "You know it's not your medal when someone else already rehearsed the speech for it." The printer was still humming when I walked into the admin annex, spitting out copy after copy of a speech no one had claimed to have written. The base planning office was in chaos, but not the natural kind. This was the precise, calculated mess of a ceremony that had been rigged weeks in advance. Color-coded maps, RSVP spreadsheets, Ceremonial flags in a box labeled Stage Left. It was a bureaucratic ballet and someone else was leading the choreography. I was assigned to assist with logistics. That meant floor plan security routes, dietary restrictions, and apparently, making sure the right people got the right medals. I was reviewing the table assignments when a page fluttered out from the print stack and landed by my boot. It wasn't formatted like the others. No bullet points, no initials, no departmental seal. Just prose. Polished, practiced, almost poetic. Grateful to represent the brave souls of Helmand. We stood under fire not for glory, but for each other. That day changed me. Helmand. I scanned further, eyes narrowing. Through chaos, we honored our creed, no one left behind. It was in those moments I learned what leadership demands, not words, but resolve. I'd written nearly those exact words in my field diary after the rescue rotation. I remember because I bled through the paper. My bandages had soaked the right side of the page. The door to the next room clicked shut. Ryan's voice echoed faintly, rehearsing again. The same tone he'd used for Model UN in high school, rehearsing power like it was theater. My fingers clenched the sheet before I folded it, tucking it between the pages of my notebook. I returned to my corner desk, flipped open a small moleskin bound in fading canvas, and skimmed the April 2018 entries. April 9th, insert team, Alpha, April 11th, contact initiated field, altered April 13th, evac via drone delay, April 14th, fire rescue med evac 2 down April 15th. Extraction by Elena W. Ryan wasn't even listed on the entry logs until the 12th. He came in for recon support, not command. My boots echoed as I made my way down the corridor to Boone's ops station, clipboard in hand as camouflage. He looked up as I approached, eyes alert. Print job for the speech, I said. Came from where he hesitated, then tapped the order log. General's office, he said softly. Private channel. Routed through ceremonial prep is routine. So no departmental check. No one questions ceremonial printing. A pause. Should we? I didn't answer. Just nodded once and left. Outside, the metal display cases had arrived early. 2 large wooden crates sat unsealed in the hallway. I knew I shouldn't have, but I peeled back the felt cover just enough to see the nameplate. Captain Ryan Marshall. Presidential Commendation for Valor. The inscription was etched, permanent, and the vote hadn't even happened yet. My breath didn't catch. My hands didn't shake. There was no shock left to feel. Just the cold, methodical clarity that comes when you realize you've been erased not by mistake, but by design. Later that evening, I found Ryan alone near the quad, fiddling with his cufflinks like some magazine cover for Officer Monthly. His posture was textbook, his conscience still a blank page. Do you remember who carried you out of Helmand? I asked. He blinked at me, smile softening. I blacked out, he said. I assumed it was command. Command. Not Elena. Not your sister. Just command. I didn't reply. I walked past him toward my room, the desert light bleeding orange into the sky like it was trying to burn something away. In the low light of my quarters, I opened my locker, pulled my rucksack out, and stood staring at the letter. The wax was still intact. My mother's handwriting sharp and patient like her. I held it long enough for my fingers to warm the paper. Then I shoved it deep into the bag. Not yet, I muttered. You can polish boots and lie through speeches, but the battlefield doesn't forget who saved whom. The brass section played the opening bars of the national anthem on a loop so repetitive it began to resemble a threat more than a celebration. Flags billowed in exact symmetry. Drones hovered overhead to test aerial angles for the ceremony live stream. The parade grounds had been transformed, an artificial theater built atop a history soaked with sweat and silence. Ryan adjusted his jacket collar for the 5th time, the nervous twitch breaking through his rehearsed confidence. He stood center stage beneath a temporary arch inscribed with duty, honor, sacrifice. Each word felt like a dare. He turned toward me in the middle of the dress run. Hey, can you tell if my left shoulder dips when I salute? It does, I replied. You lead with your chin and overcompensate your elbow. Keep the wrist straight and shift your weight back. He nodded like he'd understood, then did the exact same salute again. Wrong. Stiff. Hollow. You don't have to perform it, I muttered half to myself. Just mean it. Ryan didn't hear, or chose not to. From the viewing section, cameras clicked softly. Our father stood near the podium, smiling that practiced smile that felt stapled to his face. I saw him point at Ryan, say something to a press aide. They both laughed. Probably about the hairline or the smile angle or whatever would photograph best in front of the flag. I waited at the side ramp with a clipboard I'd been handed 5 minutes earlier, detailing who should enter, when who would shake hands with which dignitary, and what each speaker's patriotic pause was timed to last. It was a farce. I played along. Cynthia arrived just as the final song queued up, breezing through security in heels that had never touched a tarmac. She made a beeline for Ryan, arms outstretched. The hug was long and tender, her whispers full of warmth I had never been offered. Then her eyes found mine. Or almost did. They swept past me like a breeze that never landed. "Elena, dear," she said brightly. "Could you check the rear mic system?" There was a delay last time. Of course there was. I nodded once and walked away before she could smile. The rear platform was already working. Perfect frequency, zero delay. Still, I unplugged and replugged it, giving myself time to not scream into the abyss. When I returned, Ryan was taking photos with cadets. My father was pinning a practice medal on his jacket, not even the real one yet. But somehow, it already felt like it had weight. Like the medal believed him. Boone stood under the bleachers, shadowed unnoticed. He caught my eye briefly, then looked down and adjusted a messenger pouch slung over his shoulder. As I passed by him on my way back toward logistics, he gently slid a folder into my hand, barely brushing my fingers. "Do not open until May 27th. The front read in clean block letters. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. But he watched me walk away. That night, I locked my office door and turned off the overhead light. Only the desk lamp remained glowing like a single truth in a sea of sanctioned fiction. I opened the folder despite the warning. Inside was the unredacted casualty report from Operation Black Watch, Helmand 2018, Commanding Officer Capt. Elena Warren Field, Lead Lieutenant Ryan Marshall, Evac Commander Capt. Elena Warren, Critical Injuries 3, Successful Retrieval. 7. Medevac ordered by Capt. Elena Warren. There was no ambiguity, no fog of war. No room for misinterpretation. The record had been filed that way originally. My name was listed 4 times. The edited version had simply scrubbed me out. The official lie was a cleaner story, but the original truth had teeth. I stared at the final page until my eyes blurred. Behind me, the door creaked open softly. I didn't flinch. Boone leaned against the frame, speaking low. "Sometimes the system needs a correction from the inside. Buried files don't die. They wait for the right moment to resurrect themselves." The base archives sat 2 miles off main command past the barracks, and a disused helipad wrapped in beige walls and silence. It looked like a bunker, functioned like a vault, and breathed like a morgue for truths that had outlived their usefulness. No one talked about this building. Most didn't even remember it existed. I parked outside just after dawn, uniform crisp, badge-clipped hair tucked back with surgical precision. I didn't feel brave. I felt prepared. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed like flies trapped in a sealed jar. Rows of vertical filing cabinets stretched like corridors of memory, cool, quiet, indifferent. I nodded at the front desk officer and showed my clearance. He barely looked up. A name badge on his lapel read Hargrove, and he moved with the bored grace of a man long past caring. Category, he asked. Commendation Drafts, Ops Level 2017 to 2022. Regionally filtered by Afghan Southwest and Joint Task Force citations. He typed something slowly, then gestured toward the interior wing. Room C7. You've got 45 minutes. I walked into the stacks and left the world behind. Every drawer had a language of its own: unit numbers, op codes, confidential stamps. I worked alphabetically, cross-referenced by deployment date. Dust coated the handles like time's fingerprint. After 13 minutes, I found my name. Not Ryan's. Mine. Warren Elena M. Enclosure 13D Draft Commendation. January 2021, I opened the file and exhaled so quietly it almost hurt. There it was, a letter of recognition drafted for the Presidential Commendation. It cited decisive leadership in live fire extraction, exceptional adherence to combat ethics, and successful casualty recovery under hostile engagement. At the bottom, a signature from the regional commanding officer. Initials AMS, stamped for submission, pending final review. The final review never came. Behind that, a printout from internal communications recommendation: withdrawn Warren, not viable for elevation at this time. Waitlist until promotion relevant rotation. HQ admin clearance code CO09 buried, silenced, not disqualified. Just politically inconvenient. I flipped further and found a flash drive taped to the folder back. I pocketed it without hesitation. Boone was waiting outside, leaning against the hood of my car, jaw tight, like he'd bitten down on his conscience too long. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, but his eyes searched mine. "You found it," he said. "Everything but the missing votes." He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a sealed courier envelope. "I pre-logged it under your clearance," he said. "No one checked the tracking fields. If this hits the Recognition Council's review loop, it can't be deleted without a record." He handed me the envelope, and I slipped the commendation file, the flash drive, and 2 backup scans into it. No ceremony, no flourish, just movement. "I thought about confronting them," I said, staring at the seal. "About pulling it all into daylight." He shook his head. "The system's allergic to confrontation, but it's built to trip on its own paperwork." We walked back into the small on-site postal dispatch center, where a clerk sat chewing gum with headphones in. Boone placed the envelope on the desk and filled in the address himself. Joint Recognition Council, East HQ Secure, inbound processing. "No return address?" the clerk asked. Boone didn't hesitate. "It's from her. Official channel." The label printed with a whir, the ink still glossy when it was slapped onto the package. He turned to me then, not smiling, not frowning, just steady. "One envelope, one truth. No edits. In this place, authority doesn't protect the truth, it buries it in triplicate." The military legal office was colder than most rooms on base, not because of air conditioning, but because of the weight it held. Everything in here felt monitored, templated, pre-approved. Even the coffee had a hint of guilt. Somewhere between the carbon copy walls and the ever-buzzing fluorescent lights, accountability came, to die a bureaucratic death. I entered alone, but Boone wasn't far behind. Captain Trish Reynolds didn't stand to greet me. She just glanced up from her terminal, her expression somewhere between disinterest and calculation. "You're not scheduled," she said flatly. I placed the sealed commendation file on her desk. Not slid, not tossed, placed. Respectfully, deliberately. "I found this in the archive under my name, the original draft of my 2021 presidential commendation. Signed, time-stamped, never submitted." Her brows arched slightly. She didn't reach for the envelope right away. So I want to know who stopped it." Reynolds exhaled softly, opened the file, and skimmed it with trained eyes. No gasp, no dramatic pause. Just a quiet efficiency that suggested she'd seen worse. Or maybe she'd seen this before. "This is real," she said after a beat. "It's not a forgery. And if it had been processed, it would have locked into the secure commendation chain." "It wasn't." "No," she said. "But it was drafted, endorsed, and then buried." Boone stepped forward. We traced the override directive. It came from General Frank Warren's office, dated June 2022, labeled as temporary reassessment due to leadership concerns. Never went to review board, just held in administrative limbo. Reynolds tapped her pen against the desk. Once. Twice. That's not illegal, she said carefully. It's unethical. Manipulative. But technically, any flag officer can delay a commendation if it hasn't passed final clearance. I leaned forward. Even if the reason is personal? She met my eyes. Especially if the reason is personal. No one writes that in the memo. They just use phrases like timing, morale optics, or strategic cohesion. You think you're the first to disappear under those words? No, I admitted. But I'd like to be the last. Silence. Then she said, "What do you want me to do? I want to file a formal grievance under Article 39B, not to protest. Not yet. I want to compel a record review. Force the system to see itself." Reynolds gave a short, bitter laugh. Smart. Not angry. Legal. That'll rattle more doors than a protest ever could. Boone glanced out the window as if expecting someone to walk by. No one did. "I have backup," I said, sliding her a USB with the scan mission logs, the time-stamped commendation draft, and the chain of command access history Boone had recovered from the secure internet logs. She plugged it in, ran a verification scan. Green light. No tampering. "All right," she said, typing. "If we start this, it creates a public paper trail. You'll be on record challenging not just procedure but the integrity of your own father's command." "I know." Reynolds stopped typing. Her voice lowered. "Truth is heavy," she said. "But process is heavier. If you push this, it becomes real. Names get named. Career paths fracture. You sure you're ready to carry more than just truth?" I thought of Helmand. Of dragging 2 unconscious Marines across gravel while bullets chipped concrete like hail. Of Ryan's weight slung across my shoulder while the evac chopper hovered in the smoke. I didn't hesitate. I carried people through enemy fire. I can carry this. Afghanistan didn't take my voice. It taught me how to speak only when it matters most. The desk lamp cast a weak circle of light across my quarters, soft enough that the rest of the room disappeared. Just me, the old green logbook, and silence. Outside, someone ran Drill's boot heels slapping pavement in the darkness. Inside, I flipped open the leather-bound notebook with a care usually reserved for sacred things. The handwriting was uneven, marked by adrenaline and dirt. Some of the ink had smeared, and I could still feel sand in the spine of the binding. Page after page, it all came back, not just the facts, but the weight of them. The breath between each decision. The chaos I never had time to process. May 18, 2018. Southwest Helmand. Evac under fire. They had sent us on a joint recon op with minimal coverage, standard doctrine, barely plausible intel. Ryan was tagging along as liaison, his first ground op. He smiled too much in the pre-brief. The first explosion wasn't close, but it was loud. Enough to scatter the formation. Ryan froze mid-step, turned to me like a kid looking for a fire exit in a collapsing building. "Stay low," I had shouted. He didn't move. Then the second shell landed closer. Dust and metal and heat. A piece of shrapnel tore through the side of his vest. His body slammed into the ground hard. I didn't think. I dropped into a sprint, bullet skimming air, and reached him before the third hit. He was breathing, conscious, bleeding. Useless. "Get up," I said. Nothing. I hoisted him by the collar and wrapped his arm across my shoulder. He mumbled something. I thought they cleared this zone, and I didn't answer. No time. Just motion. Behind us, Maddox was pinned behind a transport crate, trying to reload with shaking hands. I remember thinking, he's too green. He won't make it alone. So I went back. Ryan half-dragged, half-carried behind me. I ducked back into the open and threw Maddox a hand signal. "Move. Now." He hesitated just long enough for a bullet to kiss the edge of his helmet. That got him moving. We made it to the extraction point 10 minutes later. Ryan was slipping in and out of consciousness. Maddox was whispering the Lord's Prayer. I didn't speak. There wasn't a word that fit. After the mission, the brass gave Ryan a commendation for maintaining cohesion under enemy fire. Maddox put in a transfer request the next day. I was offered a field promotion for tactical bravery in high-risk conditions. I declined it. I didn't want to be rewarded for someone else's weakness. Not like that. I snapped the logbook shut and sat with it in my lap. My hand hovered over it, fingers brushing the faded cover. Then I slid a copy of the entire log into a plain manila envelope, no notes, no annotations, and walked it to the base post drop. Addressed to Joint Recognition Council Records Unit. No return address. No name. Let the words speak for themselves. Back in my quarters, I sat on the bed without turning the light back on. The logbook was still warm in my hands. My body felt both distant and wired, like something waiting to be aimed. My laptop chimed. One email. Unknown sender. Subject line. May 18, 2018. I clicked. One sentence. Still standing because of you. I never forgot. Sometimes the lie isn't what they print. It's what they leave out. The walls of the public affairs office were plastered with photos that meant nothing to me. High angles of parades, group shots from change of command ceremonies, the kind of images that made the military look neat and invulnerable. They weren't lies. They just weren't the truth. I sat in a plastic chair next to a humming printer the size of a refrigerator while Officer Darla flipped through the final version of the commendation ceremony program. Her hands were visibly shaking, but she kept her smile brittle and professional. There were updates, she said, but we printed everything according to approved protocol. May I see it? I asked, already knowing. She passed me the glossy booklet. Ryan's face was on the front cover, captured mid-salute, eyes stern like he knew what command should look like. I turned the pages, bios of recipients, descriptions of citations, a full-page dedication to exemplary leadership during Operation Helmand. His name appeared twice, mine not once. Boone appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Darla, we need the print job metadata. Internal authorization code, sign-off chain timestamps. Darla blinked. That's restricted to command channels. Boone stepped closer, lowered his voice. We're command adjacent. I'm not asking for the moon, just the metadata. She hesitated, then turned to her screen, tapped a few keys. A log appeared. Boone leaned over, scanning. His finger hovered over a string of characters. AuthWW 0423 FW. His eyes locked on it. General Warren's override credentials, he murmured. Approved on April 23rd. Predate to the final review cycle. Darla's voice was almost inaudible. I didn't have a choice. I looked back at the booklet, then handed it to her. Neither did I said. Until now. Later that day, Boone and I stood in the empty print depot behind logistics. Rolls of glossy stock lined the wall like torpedoes waiting for launch. He handed me a sealed folder with no markings except a red wax stamp I hadn't seen in years, Presidential Liaison Office. I sent them everything he said. The logs, the override data, your mission diary, the original commendation draft. It bypasses base command entirely. You could get reprimanded. He shrugged. So could you. That's what makes us even. Outside, the wind rattled the loose flag on the pole. Inside, I returned to my quarters, took out my dress uniform. It still smelled faintly of starch and long-forgotten ceremonies. I placed my unworn ribbon bar into its small velvet case and laid it gently beside the uniform. Not as decoration, as evidence. Boone knocked once, stepped in. No words, just stood there for a moment. This isn't about recognition anymore, he said. It's about what can't be erased once it's printed in history. I looked at the case, then at the envelope addressed to the Recognition Council. That's when the knock came. A courier stood in the doorway holding a plain manila envelope. He looked between me and Boone. "Captain Warren," he said, "your name is in the presidential itinerary packet. No edits allowed. There's nothing louder than silence from the people who should be proud of you." The parade grounds shimmered under the morning light like a movie-set flag snapping, brass gleaming soldiers standing in symmetrical lines, as if ceremony could overwrite everything unsaid. There was pride in the air. Just not for me. My boots tapped against the concrete as I approached the seating chart posted on a temporary bulletin board. My name was there, Captain Elena Warren, row B, second seat from the aisle. No asterisk, no omissions. For once, unmissable. I didn't need to look over my shoulder to feel the shift. General Frank Warren stood behind me, his expression fixed somewhere between surprise and calculation. "You weren't on the original list," he said low and clipped. "I was never off it," I replied, not turning around. He walked away without another word. Ryan approached minutes later holding 2 water bottles and grinning like a man who had rehearsed his smile more than his speech. "They moved some names around," he said, offering me a bottle. "I think they're squeezing in extra medal recipients." Confusing, right? I took the water, nodded, and said nothing. He looked toward the podium, then back at me. Eyebrows pinched. "Did something happen?" "I should know about, I'd say. That depends on what you think already happened." Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. His confusion was genuine, and that made it worse. As the officers aligned near the stage for dry runs, Boone appeared from the sidelines, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand. He jerked his chin, subtly beckoning me. I followed him around the bleachers to a side tent where a woman in a gray suit waited with a handshake and a badge clipped to her belt. Presidential Liaison, West Coast Military Honors Division. "Captain Warren," she said with a warm smile. "I'm Melissa Pratt. Just confirming that you're fully briefed on the ceremony sequence and presentation protocol." "I am." She handed me a copy of the final itinerary. My name appeared again, printed embossed and aligned under the Joint Recognition banner. "It's a pleasure to finally have the paperwork catch up to the truth," she added. Boone didn't speak. He didn't have to. Later, as I walked back toward the seating area, I spotted 2 familiar faces near the edge of the formation. Tasha Lynn, once my second-in-command, and Boyd, a logistics officer who owed me a favor I'd never asked him to repay. Lynn stepped forward, her handshake firm. We saw the footage. About time. Boyd followed suit. People forget files have backups. Not all ghosts stay buried. I nodded once, not trusting my voice to stay level. By noon, the rehearsal reached its crescendo. Marching sequences, flag protocols, and then the announcer's voice mic-checked and amplified across the field. And among the honorees, Captain Ryan Marshall for leadership excellence. I stood motionless. And Captain Elena Warren for distinguished conduct in Operation Helmand 2018. There it was. Spoken aloud, public, irrevocable. Frank's eyes snapped to me from across the field. His face gave away nothing, but the movement, the pivot, the involuntary flick of attention said everything. As the rehearsal wound down, I turned to walk away. He intercepted me near the edge of the officer's tent, his voice quiet and severe. "This isn't the moment to make this personal." I met his gaze, level and steady. "That decision was made the day you erased me." He flinched. Not visibly, but I felt it. As the formations reassembled, the announcer's voice crackled again, rehearsing the names for tomorrow's full ceremony. I stood still, breath shallow, as he repeated, "Captain Elena Warren." I didn't need an audience. I just needed him to say my name without shame. The stage was draped in navy and white, the presidential seal hovering over the podium like a final judgment. Rows of chairs filled the parade grounds, each one occupied by pressed uniforms, dignitaries, families, and more cameras than we'd had rifles in Helmand. The air buzzed not with pride, but with anticipation sharpened by years of silence, finally reaching its breaking point. From my seat in the second row, I saw Frank open the sealed envelope. His jaw tightened. A flicker of hesitation a microsecond too long betrayed the moment he saw it. My name. He stood motionless for a beat, the crowd none the wiser before tucking the envelope into the side of the podium. The speech in his hand trembled slightly, almost imperceptibly. But I saw it. Boone saw it too. He was standing at the rear fence, arms crossed, gaze steady. Frank stepped up to the microphone. The applause died down as he cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this day of honor," he began, voice crisp, authoritative. "We gather not only to award medals but to affirm service, legacy, and sacrifice." His cadence was flawless. The kind of speech people had always said he was born to give, but his left hand gripped the podium tighter with every word. "We begin by recognizing exemplary leadership in joint operations. A soldier whose courage under fire reflects the highest tradition of this command." Ryan shifted in his seat beside me, spine straightening like he already knew. "Captain Ryan Marshall." The crowd erupted. Claps, whistles, 2 standing ovations in the back. Cynthia dabbed her eyes. Ryan walked to the stage with practiced humility, a soft smile on his face, as Frank pinned the medal to his chest. He whispered something probably rehearsed. They posed for the camera. All was smooth, perfect. Then came the moment that wasn't on the script. Frank turned the page. His fingers hesitated. His mouth opened, then closed. A hush settled. It spread like smoke. He looked up. Captain Elena Warren. No flourish, no embellishment. Just a name. My name. The silence afterward was louder than the cheers before it. For half a second no one moved. Then I stood. No one reached for my arm. No one pulled me back. No one dared. My boots echoed as I walked toward the stage, each step a reverberation of years I'd spent walking behind men who never saw me. I approached the podium. Frank held the medal in his right hand. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. Neither did I. He stepped forward, affixed the medal to my uniform with professional precision. The pin caught the fabric just over my heartbeat. No words passed between us. I turned, facing the crowd. The cameras clicked. The rows of uniforms blurred. I raised my hand in a sharp salute, not to my father, who stood inches away, but to the flag behind him. A flag that had forgotten me once. But not today. He'd said 1,000 names before. Mine was the first to make him choke. The sun perched high above the parade stage, a perfect California glare that flattened everything into a rigid tableau of medals and posture. The official transcript sat in Frank's hand like a loaded weapon. He cleared his throat, voice amplified across the field, bouncing off press cameras, cell phones, and decades of silence. Captain Elena Warren, he repeated, reading from the page in front of him. He hadn't expected to say it once, now he had to say it twice. His eyes skimmed down to the next paragraph, the one mandated by the Department of Defense and verified by the Joint Recognition Council. It detailed a heroic extraction in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, dragging 2 injured men through active mortar fire, initiating air support, securing an evacuation point. His hand trembled. For valor and decisive action under fire during the Helmand engagement in 2018. There it was. I didn't blink. He kept going, voice faltering now. Carried out while sustaining minor injuries herself, with full coordination of airlift and personnel. A murmur rippled through the seated officers. One voice, too loud to be a whisper, asked, "Wasn't that Ryan's op?" Frank's jaw clenched visibly on stage. Ryan, seated just behind him, shifted uncomfortably. His hands, previously relaxed, now formed tight folds in his lap. The smile he'd worn 20 minutes earlier had curdled into a blank stare. His confusion wasn't just emotional, it was mathematical. The timelines didn't add up. And suddenly, neither did the praise he'd received. The transcript didn't mention his name. Not once. I stepped forward as instructed. The metal on my chest gleamed not from polish, but because for the first time light actually reached it. Frank extended a hand more reflex than respect, and I accepted it without warmth. Cameras flashed, shutters clicked. He reached for the final words of the citation, and in recognition of courage under fire, Captain Warren joins the ranks of his voice caught. He swallowed hard, then skipped the rest. That concludes the citation. He turned to exit the stage too quickly. Too early. He hadn't returned my salute. The pause was microscopic, but in the military it was thunder. There's protocol, and then there's insult. I stood motionless, hand still raised to my temple, eyes fixed on the flag, and so did the cameras. A cough in the crowd broke the stillness. Boone, standing just off stage, moved closer. He didn't smile, just leaned close enough for only me to hear him. You just rewrote the chain of command. They never expected the video to surface. They never thought anyone remembered. The file name was nondescript, A18, OP, Helmand, May 2018, Cam 2, Final. But Boone knew better. The name was never the truth. It was the timestamp that mattered. He didn't say anything when he slid the drive across the polished table in the legal review boardroom. Captain Reynolds accepted it, wordlessly inserting it into the secure terminal. The room was windowless, climate-controlled, lit by institutional fluorescence that made every breath feel clinical. I sat still in my chair, back straight, uniform pressed. But my hands remained in my lap, hidden, trembling only slightly. I had waited 5 years for this moment, not knowing if it would ever come, not even sure if it should. The footage loaded. Grainy, helmet cam, screaming, smoke. And then me. Grabbing Ryan by the collar of his vest, dragging him across broken concrete as rounds cracked overhead. I lifted him like dead weight. He didn't resist. He couldn't. His eyes were unfocused, panic pooling behind them. The second soldier, Maddox, was conscious but bleeding from the leg. I remember yelling at him to stay low, remember using my own body to shield them both as I fired 2 rounds toward a rooftop position. The screen stilled on a frame, my arm reaching for the comm unit, blood streaming down it, dirt streaked into my face. Captain Reynolds exhaled softly. Boone leaned against the wall, arms crossed, not smug, just exhausted. This was never submitted, Reynolds said. Why? Because the man who would have signed off on it was too busy giving someone else the speech I wrote with my blood, I said quietly. She nodded. Then we'll submit it now. Ryan sat across from me, his hands folded but shaking. He hadn't said a word since the playback began. His jaw was clenched so tightly I wondered if his teeth might shatter. I didn't speak either. Not to him. Not yet. Reynolds opened her laptop. I'll issue a correction to the awards register. Your commendation will be listed. Officially. Permanently. It's not about the medal anymore, I said. It never was, Boone replied. But permanence matters. An hour later, the video was archived in the secure joint recognition database, time-stamped, logged, authenticated. And 20 minutes after that, someone no one ever found out who leaked it. By evening, the clip was everywhere. On internal message boards, on encrypted service channels, even on a secure subpage of the military press network. It spread like fire under a door. The footage didn't accuse. It didn't demand. It just showed the truth. And in its silence, it screamed louder than any speech Frank Warren had ever given. The comments started flooding in. I was there. That's her. She didn't even flinch. Why wasn't this part of the citation? By nightfall, Frank had canceled all appearances. Base command went silent. Ryan hadn't returned to his quarters. Until he knocked. Not hard. Just once, then stood there. I opened the door slowly. The hallway light caught his face, haunted, smaller somehow. The same man who'd once grinned effortlessly through commendation ceremonies now stood like a child outside a principal's office. I don't deserve to ask for forgiveness, he said. But I needed to say, I finally remember. A man can conquer enemies and still lose to memory. The office hadn't changed. The same polished oak desk. The same shelves lined with medals and books no one ever read. Same framed commendations angled to catch the light. The room smelled like lemon polish and distanced two things Frank Warren always preferred over people. I stood at the threshold, not knocking, not asking. He looked up but didn't rise. Elena. The sound of my name finally spoken in full didn't move me. It didn't hurt. It didn't heal. You wanted this to be private, I said. He gestured toward the chair across from him, but I remained standing. The silence wasn't heavy. It was hollow. I didn't think the system was ready for you, he said, as if reading from a script he barely believed. No, I replied. You weren't. His jaw tightened. For a second he looked older than I remembered, like the dust in the corners had finally found his bones. I had to make decisions. About optics. About future leadership. You made a choice? I interrupted. To erase, not to protect. He leaned back, eyes darting briefly to the photo on his desk, the edited one, the one that had always sat front and center. Ryan in the middle, commanding presence. My uniform sleeve barely visible, cut off at the frame. I reached into my pocket and placed the medal on his desk. The one he'd given me on my 12th birthday. For discipline, he'd said. A military trinket repurposed as a parenting shortcut. I never wore it, I said. Didn't earn it. Didn't need it. His hand hovered over it but didn't touch. You think I didn't see you? He asked, almost bitter. I saw how you held yourself. How you never complained. I saw it. But never out loud, I said. Never where it counted. For a moment he said nothing. Then slowly he reached for the photo frame. He turned it around. Not the edited version, the original. There I was, standing next to Ryan. Same uniform, same posture. Eyes forward, fully visible. I remembered the shutter click. I remembered thinking, maybe this one will make the desk. I edited the other one, he said. Years ago. Easier to explain things that way. He set the original down facing me. His fingers lingered at the edge. A faint knock on the door. Boone appeared briefly in the hall waiting, then disappeared without a word. I'd told him not to come in. He had already done enough. I suppose you want a statement, Frank said. An apology. Public. I want nothing from you, I said. I stepped toward the desk, picked up the unedited photo, and placed it face down. Keep whichever version you like. I turned to leave. As I reached the door, his voice followed, not strong, not commanding. Just barely audible. I see you now. I didn't turn back. Didn't acknowledge it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it had come too late. And because recognition without responsibility is just another kind of silence. Some letters are written before the war ends. Others are meant to end it. The apartment was quieter than usual, even for me. No hum of the fan, no distant bass from a neighbor's stereo. Just the kind of stillness that only shows up when it knows something sacred is about to begin. The letter had waited long enough. I sat at the edge of my bed, back straight, the envelope balanced in my palm. The seal was faded, the crease across the middle worn soft from being folded and unfolded without ever being opened. It had traveled with me to 3 continents, 5 assignments, 1 almost promotion, and 1,000 reasons not to confront it. I opened it slowly, not like someone eager for answers, but like someone unwrapping a memory. Her handwriting was curved, deliberate, unmistakably hers. I heard her voice the moment I saw it. Not loud, not commanding, but weighty. She was always weighty when it mattered. Elena. If you're reading this, it means the silence has gotten louder than the room. I hope I'm wrong. But I knew the man I married. I knew what power would ask of him, and what he would give it. I paused. Already, I could feel my breath catching not because of the content, but because of how precisely she had seen all of this years ago. Long before I had the words to name it. He may never say your name with pride, but you were never meant to be a footnote. You were meant to be a blueprint. She wrote of the long nights I spent in silence as a teenager, eyes fixed on boot camp manuals while Ryan snuck out. She remembered the scraped knees, the split lips, the unanswered questions about fairness. You didn't fight for recognition then. Don't fight for it now. Fight for something no one can take from you, the kind of legacy that doesn't need applause to stand. I swallowed hard. My fingers tightened around the edges of the paper. Leave proof, not bitterness. Leave records, not scars. Leave a trail of integrity. And walk like you are already seen, because you are. The last line was underlined. Your silence won't be forgotten. It will echo. I held the page to my chest, not as a performance, not out of sentiment, but because it had weight, and now so did I. The knock on the door came an hour later. I didn't get up right away. Just sat there, letter in hand, knowing who it was before I even opened it. Boone stepped inside without a word. He didn't ask, didn't pry. He looked at the letter on the nightstand, nodded once, and sat beside me on the floor. We said nothing. There was no need. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It had shape. It had meaning. Like a bell that had already rung. I smiled, not the kind that seeks joy, but the kind that settles in your bones when you realize the fight is no longer just for survival. It's for creation. I looked at Boone, then at the letter again. Time to build something no one can erase. Not all salutes are for ceremony. Some are for peace. The air at Fort Griffin smelled different, fresher somehow. Maybe it was the pines that edged the base instead of the cement-drenched parade grounds I'd grown up on. Or maybe it was the absence of ghosts. The office was modest. One window, two desks, a bookshelf that leaned to the left. But the nameplate was new. So was the title. Captain Elena Warren, Office of Training Development. A clean slate disguised as a reassignment. Boone was already here, of course, early as always, organizing intake files into neat stacks. His new title, Deputy Program Director, had come without fanfare, just like everything else he preferred. We didn't talk much about Fort Sutter anymore. Not because it hurt, but because some victories don't need a post-mortem. I adjusted the plaque on the wall, not the commendation from the ceremony, but the new one. The one signed directly by the Joint Recognition Council. It didn't list battle statistics. It simply read, "For unshakable integrity and enduring service." Lynn and Boyd arrived next, balancing cardboard boxes and coffee. Both had volunteered to transfer. Time for the right kind of chain of command, Boyd had said when they accepted. Lynn had just nodded. By midday, the room filled with the hum of first-day logistics. New officer cadets filed in half wide-eyed, half pretending they weren't. I knew the type had once been the type. I stepped to the front of the room. No podium, just presence. Leadership, I said, isn't about being first. It's about who stands last. A few eyebrows lifted. Most just listened. That was fine. The ones who really needed to hear it would remember. Later, Boone handed me a thin folder. Inside was the mentorship program proposal we'd drafted, targeted toward soldiers overlooked for advancement, ones whose performance didn't fit the headline narrative. It was already approved. Quiet revolution, he murmured. Outside, the sun settled gently across the courtyard. The kind of golden hour light that makes everything feel earned. I stepped out to breathe, stretching the stiffness from my shoulders. Across the yard, a young recruit, barely 20, probably stood at attention. She hesitated, then lifted her hand to her brow in a crisp, perfect salute. I hadn't expected it. I hadn't earned it from her, not yet. But I returned it steady, deliberate, and without a single trace of the past weighing it down. She smiled, then turned away, disappearing into the training wing. I walked back inside, passing Boone and the others, and entered my office. On my desk sat a single white envelope. No seal, no wax, no pretense. Just my name written in neat black ink to Captain Elena Warren. Not a summons, not a reprimand, just acknowledgement. This time I didn't wait to open it. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together.